Okay, good morning and welcome to Sunday Story Hour, where we share real life stories of how human design has helped our guests to know themselves on a deep transformational level. By knowing and trusting ourselves, we develop deeper, more honest relationships and unlock our true gifts. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and my guest today is Lisa Stark. Hi, Lisa. I'm
Hi,
happy
good
to
morning.
see you. Good morning. Lisa is a 5-1 pure generator, and I noticed you referred to yourself as a sacral generator, but so I get they're the same thing for those of you who are not sure. Now, I'm just going to remind you, Lisa, and myself by saying this. We have guests of all, people who watch this of all different levels. So if at any point I feel like I'm asking really silly questions, it's just so that we don't talk over people. So in our little whatever, but I met Lisa 2 years, well, yeah, 2 years ago, but 3 conferences ago in Colorado. And we had a lovely afternoon together, and we did some shopping and talked human design during all of that, in addition to that. And it was a really lovely day. And unfortunately, that's the last time I saw you, right? It was like right. So this is really nice to really connect. And I would love for you to tell people to go way back and tell them about what life was like before human design, how you found it, and what the immediate impact was of learning that, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite stories.
Okay, good.
It was funny when I was actually prepping for this, I was calculating too, like how long it's been since I've seen you. And I was like, God, it feels like it was forever ago, but also yesterday. It's kind of crazy how time
Yeah,
works.
don't you think that's how all life is when you get to a certain
Yes.
age?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to tell myself.
Right.
But yeah, so my human design story is, I would say, one of my favorite stories. um, I Back in 2012, I think is kind of where my story would probably start a little bit. 2012 was kind of this year for me, where I started down this spiritual self-development path, right? Prior to 2012, what I see now is I was your typical not self-generator. And I was very good at it. But I like to say that in 2012, I started down this path because I had my son, my youngest son, in 2011. And he came in with the cross of the vessel of love. And so for those of you new to human design, that's his incarnation cross. And part of that person's cross is to find self-love themselves and to initiate other people into that. And so unbeknownst to me, just by birthing him and having his aura in my space really catapulted this journey for me that was almost like a 180. And I would say I spent those early years doing a lot of things about just recognizing, more emotional things about myself, more spiritual things about myself, just learning all the self-development. But it was really, I was searching in this time. And I was really searching for something that I couldn't put my finger on. Prior to that, I was a very, like I said, not self-generator. I was very good at doing. Exceptionally good at doing. I would say I was successful in like the traditional term of business. I had my first senior executive job at a hospital when I was 26. And so I was very good at doing and being. But I also had a lot of those not self tendencies. I did to people please. I did because that's what drove my self-worth, my accomplishments, and I was good for it and I got accolades for it. And so you kind of start to develop that conditioning of like, oh, this is how we succeed in life. And I was very quickly at a young age burning myself out. And when I had him, it really kind of triggered this. I don't want to be this anymore, but I don't know why, and I don't know who to be. And so now we're going to go searching. And so it really wasn't until about 8 years, probably into this self-help, self-development journey, that I found human design. And I remember, it's so funny because I think one of the things that's beautiful about human design is when you look at it in retrospect of your life and you put the lens on the retrospect, you start going, oh, I did do those things. I didn't know what I was doing. And so it is kind of reassuring in a way of like, in retrospect, you look back on all these things and go, oh, that was totally a sacral thing. Oh, that was a 5-1 thing. And so when I was in this, it was a women's like entrepreneurship, empowerment kind of Facebook group. And I remember I saw somebody reference this thing of like a generator in human design. And in the context of the thread, I really didn't know what it was, but I'm somebody who like loves anything that will tell me more about myself or others. And so I just remember going, oh, what's that? And I do that with my body, because for those of you that are sacral generators or mani-gens, like this is what we do. We come up, we're like, oh, what's that? And we start responding. And it was such a visceral sacral response that I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. But also as a one line, I'm like, oh, tell me everything. And I just remember I could not consume information fast enough, trying to find it, trying to tell me. And I just remember, and for those of you that have that sacral engine, you don't tire out when it's something you love. And so I just remember it almost became this like, just life-giving battery just to research and find, and everything that I was starting to read and understand. And it just was, it just was amazing. That's all I don't even know how else to describe it. And I remember too, like the things when because I was looking back and just reflecting on, because now that it's been, several years into the experiment, it's like, I can say so many wonderful things about human design and all of the things that it's offered me. And I was trying to kind of reflect back on, you'd asked, kind of like, what was like that initial thing that it kind of gave you? And I really was like, oh, there were a couple of really big ones. And the big one was reading about the sacral response and understanding, oh, that's literally how I got here. And almost like reaffirming myself, oh, human design is for me. Like it is a sacral response. And then, like I said, looking back in retrospect of all the times that's happened in my life and going, oh my Lord, like I didn't connect the two, but that makes so much sense. But it also really kind of like showed me the conditioning that I had been searching for the answer of, there's got to be another way to do this, right? There's got to be another way to not try to do everything myself. I'm also a single definition person, so I don't need other people to complete my definition. And so there was always this energy of, I can just do it and I can do it myself, and it's easier to do it myself, and all the people pleasing tendencies and all those things. And it was just so validating. And it also showed me a way out, which is the other thing I love about human design. In my chart, I'm equal parts kind of like logic, strategy, and intuition. So I love anything that's like practical. I'm also a 5-line. I love anything that's practical and applicable, but I also love the woo. And so this really was like one of those things that was like, oh, it just brought it all together for me. And the other thing I remember too, that was just really impactful for me, like I said, is I always had this like push or pull. I don't know if anybody in the audience has experienced that, right? It's like you have your own internal conundrum, right? It's like we're pushing and pulling against our own energy. And because I am equal parts strategy and logic and intuition and knowing, that kind of like push and pull and not understanding which one am I, what's the difference, and the confusion of that, being able to start to decipher that that's normal for me. And that's one of my lessons, is just like, oh, good job. We're doing the right thing. We didn't even know it, but good job. Yeah. And then I think the third thing that was really big for me, I'm really big on profiles, because I think profiles are just so, they just like describe your life story to you. And you're like, I feel so seen. And as a 5-1, the one line was a no-brainer, right? I'm like, I've always been like, give me the information, let me read it. I often would say, if I could get paid to go to school as a job, I would love it. But the 5-line really it really hit me home. It's like my soul knew that feeling of that projection field, but I could never put words to it. And understanding that that's where a lot of my people pleasing development had come from, because of that pressure from the external and people wanting to save me and being a generator and I can do it. So I think for me, to sum it up, it was like these 3 big components were the initial things that really just, it was so freeing to just be like, oh, okay, it makes total sense. And also it became so clear, like how attached I had become to these stories and conditionings that had nothing to do with me. And like in an instant, it was just this permission to like let that weight go and not attach to those stories. And I'm like, oh, like we can do something different. We don't have to do it this way. So long-winded story probably, but yeah, that's, I guess,
No,
it in a nutshell.
that was a great story. So I'm curious, when you say we can let go of these stories, what do you think was the first story you let go of, and how did you, we're conditioned with these stories. So how did you find the strength to let it go, or was it easy to let go? What was it?
I would say, I think the process of letting go happens over and over and over and over again, because I can honestly say I've let go of a lot of things, but they're still there at a deeper level. So I don't know if that really explains it 100%, but like, I don't get it perfect every time, but I'm acutely aware now when I don't get it perfect. And one example I think that I like to bring up is the people pleasing for me, because that's huge in my chart. I have an open emotional solar plexus. I'm a 5 line. I'm a generator. Like I have all this condition around like doing and people pleasing. And I will say that's a prime example of where I was like, oh, I don't have to be this way. But I've literally hardwired it into my nervous system for the last 45 years. And so it's this process of every day, like going, literally, the other thing for generators is like, we've got to be in our body. And because I was so heady, I spent so much time up here. So it was this daily practice of like getting in my body, understanding that I'm trying to people please. And in certain moments, I might still do it and go, okay, we're going to try that differently, or go, no, I'm not going to do that. And I still struggle with that a little bit to this day, but I'm so much stronger in it. And I think that's just one of the things that I will continue to decondition my whole life. Not from a terrible way, but just understanding that that's how I'm built. I have a natural tendency that way, and I have to keep up on it. The other one that I think is really important, sorry, and I want to say this because I think human design falls a lot into like some of the woo communities, and I'm very much into the woo community. Anybody wants to talk woo woo, let's talk woo woo. But but what was interesting was you can almost get reconditioned in another direction. So how I would say this is, prior to human design, I was very heady. I'm a very intellectual person. I am very good at strategy. I'm very good at seeing patterns. And so that served me so well, I would say, my prior life. But when you start getting into spiritual communities, sometimes we demonize the mind. And we go, oh, but you shouldn't. You should know everything 100% in your body. And so then we start to get conditioned the other way, that we can't use the mind. And so what I think was interesting for me is, I think where I have really deconditioned, this is one that I've really gotten good at, is allowing the strength of my strategy and patterning and like intellect to marry up with my intuition. And I see that now they are both absolutely a piece of who I am. And so I just bring that up because I think sometimes human design gets put into some of those categories of woo, and the mind,
right?
Yes, the mind gets demonized. And yes, it shouldn't run the show, but right. Some people have a very strong definition or even patterning in gates that makes it an absolutely wonderful tool for you if we don't prejudge that. So
yeah, wow. So there was a lot of good stuff in there. One of the things I want to go back to that you said that I'd like you to go, if it feels correct, if you go deeper on, is when you said you get back into your body. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So for me, and I think this is probably different than for everybody,
sure,
but it is very easy for me to because of the conditioning of that, I very easily lived up here. It's like, I like to live up here. It's much easier for me. Being in my body is harder. It requires me to slow down. It requires me to think. It requires me to process. It requires me to be present. And so for me, I notice that when I call it spinning, or I start to feel some chaos, in the sense of like, now what I've just like kind of almost trained myself to witness from that passenger consciousness is like, oh, okay, we're running at high speed right now. Like some of my indicators in my day job, because I still work in a corporate role too, is when I literally said between a meeting the other day, I tried to move a meeting up because I had 10 minutes left. And I was like, actually, I have to go to the bathroom. And I was like, okay, I'm out of my body. I'm already trying to move on to the next thing. And that chaos and that spinning was like totally going to override the body, and I was going to go there. So I literally had to just stop myself and go, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Okay. ground. And for me, breath is huge for me, and just feeling my body. Like if I can just get my feet and go, okay, I'm sitting in a chair, I'm in my office. Okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom and I'm going to come back. I'm going to use that 10 minutes not to get ahead, but to come back into my body, because clearly I had already left. So for me, the biggest thing about coming back into your body is first, you got to even be present to the fact that you're not there. And that takes practice. And so I think one of the things that I help kind of like people talk through is like, what are triggers for each of us? Right? It's like, when do you notice you leave your body? What are some of the behaviors you do? What are some of the things you say? What are some of the things you feel? And it's almost like starting to connect those two things in your brain of like, okay, when you do that, that's your moment to stop and take a second and go, okay, assess, where am I? Am I even present? Okay, then I got to do something different. And that sometimes, I remember when I first started my experiment, I had to do it a whole lot more than I do now, but that was Friday that I did that. And I was like, whoa, where are we? I was like, I was off on another planet somewhere trying to get ahead instead of just like, no, you have 10 minutes, maybe take a breath, come back in your body and go to the bathroom.
That feels like very much like that might be your open route at work there with that. Oh, let's use every second, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny because I know you and I think we're going to get into some of the 50, but it's the 52, right? The 52 calls for stillness. It's where my wisdom comes from my root, if I cannot let that open root override me. And it's just, yeah. So I would say, as far as like to your question of coming back to the body, for me, I've learned to link up certain behaviors and things that I do that my brain now goes, okay, we've checked out. And when I say checked out, I mean, we're just on autopilot. And so it's like, okay, come back. Because when I'm on autopilot, that means I'm not in my body and the sacral cannot talk to me.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump ahead just from how we said, just because you did bring it up. And you have the 52, it's in your design Mars. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it is in the body. And for those of you who have heard of Gene Keys, which is kind of a extension from human design, Richard Rudd was very much involved with human design and then had his own experience, and he's kind of extrapolated from it. And I don't think you and I have talked about this part, that 52 is your core wound in Gene Keys. So I'm sure you know that, but and then you have it in the second line. So second line is the core wound of denial.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because we had talked about that we were going to talk about some of our electromagnetic connections. And for those of you who don't know what that means, if you look at a chart and you say, okay, I have this gate. So we're talking about that she has the gate 52 off of the root. And I would share my screen, but I'm afraid that if I do that, you kind of lose the conversational feel. But if you look at any chart and you find the gate 52 on the root, it points up to the sacral. And then I have the one that points down from the sacral, which is the gate 9. So those two are always looking for each other. So that's an electromagnetic connection that Lisa and I have. And it's one that I have not really explored. And so for myself personally, the way I'm really learning about relationships is finding people I have these electromagnetics with, and then let's talk about how that feels for us. So Lisa has the open root with the defined sacral. I have the open sacral with the defined root. So when we are in aura, or even, time, space continuum is irrelevant. So I feel this is in aura. We are connecting our energies through this conversation. Right. So when we connect, we feel that electromagnetic connection. Among others, we have, I think, four.
Mm-hmm. We have 4 electrodes.
Yeah. So, but we feel that, and it makes a really interesting dynamic for the two of us, because we have all 9 centers defined, but nothing from up here gets to the throat, right?
Yeah, we still have floating head syndrome.
Right? So it really is important for people to understand that although the head can get to the throat, the head is really meant to go out, right? So I don't really worry. I oftentimes have that split with people. If I do have a split, that's usually where it is. So the energy goes out and then it comes back up through the root. So for you, that, until you learn to navigate that can really feel all that divine inspiration that goes out into the world, you take back in a way through the root. So your gate 52 is, well, let me ask you how you would describe the gate 52 energy and how that comes up for you. And then I'll talk about my 9.
Yeah, for sure. So 52 is a lot about kind of like perspective and seeing the big picture. And so those are all wonderful things, right? They serve us well in so many things individually, in our careers, in our helping other people, all these things. But when that gate is defined on an open root, the open root is a pressure center, right? So there's this pressure to get things done, to override the right timing, to just push, 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 to kind of be free of this pressure. And that has been something that was a huge thing. And what I also want to say is society reinforced my open root. So it made it even more of a core wound for me, because why I say that is society kind of like applauds productivity, right? And applauds people who can kind of get a whole lot of things done and be good at it. And so there was this vicious cycle, right? It's like, I could do it and I could do it and I could override it and I could override it. And people were like, good job, right? So now we've reinforced the core wound. When in reality, the wisdom of the 52 from how I've experienced it is when I can get still, I can actually see that wisdom better, instead of before I would get so much, I could see the big picture and I'm completely open from the G up. So it's like, I had all of these ideas, all these possibilities, all of this bigness, that sometimes it was really hard for me to like focus it in and take action. Sometimes I could get lost in the bigness because it was so easy to see it all. But then what you would do is you would kind of, your open root would go, okay, but we got to do something. And so then you'd spend a lot of time kind of trying these things when really I'm supposed to be responding. I'm supposed to be still. I'm supposed to be, it was just totally opposite. And the funny thing too about it is in describing that energy, I'm also reflecting on the fact that one of the things I was really resistant about with human design was I was not a mani-gen. Like, because that energy of, right, I see all these things, I'm gonna go try all these things. It was also one of the things that made me feel like I should be a mani-gen. And so it's like, it really was taking me out of my flow as a generator, but it had so much, it served me so well because I could see everything. And because I was a generator and I could just keep trying all the things and keep going, it wasn't until later in my life when I was like, oh, that's probably not the best way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So, when you're saying seeing the big picture, that would, with an open root, it could very easily turn into this big pressure, right?
Yeah.
The pressure, the root is a pressure center. I just want to clarify that for everybody, the root is a pressure center for everybody, but it goes on off pulse, right? But when you have an open root, it's kind of like always on, right? It's like the pressure is always on. So the defined root, which I have mine defined through the 3955. So it's part of my emotional wave. It connects through an individual wave up to the solar plexus. So my pressure is very much related to my melancholy, like I feel more pressure when I'm feeling emotionally low, that sort of thing. Like, how do I fix this was always a big thing. But that gate 9 that I have that connects with your 52 is very much this energy of, okay, what do I focus on? What do I focus on? And it's been interesting for me to kind of play with it because it is my Mercury. It's my conscious Mercury, which for Mercury is what tells us what we're here to communicate, right? And so knowing what to focus on, where am I meant to focus? I'm not a generator, but gate 9 is a format channel that is connected to the sacral. So it is still a gate that works in response. So that's been a huge thing for me to try to understand. Yes, I'm a projector. I need to wait for recognition and invitation. But in response to that recognition and invitation, I can know where I'm meant to focus. Now, that doesn't mean, little tiny things, but like with my message, that's been really clear for me. And so that's one of the reasons I'm talking so much about these connections and things like that now, because through understanding of that message right there and other, I have 3 different defined gates on my open sacral. The 59 and the 14 are my two sun gates. And the 59, I have two other times also. So I've got, all of this hanging energy antennas on my open sacral. So I'm really meant to learn in relationship, and I'm meant to focus through relationship. And the response has been, many people have talked to me about how human design has helped in their relationships. And I kind of came into this through how it has helped me understand my own relationships. That's really when I got hooked. So, but that 952 together really, for me, helps me to find the response, because it activates, when I get that connection, that format energy, it gives me that pulse that tells me, okay, here's something to respond to, even though I'm not a generator. So I'm not trying to say it changes for those listening, I'm not trying to say it changes me to be someone who that's my authority, but I still do, we still do feel the energies of these channels in the correct way. A projected channel still needs invitation, even if you're a manifester, right? It's just understanding the energy. And for me to understand that energy and relationship, when you start to know, oh, this is why I feel like this way when I'm with this person, it's because it's giving me that something to respond to. And sometimes responses don't always feel good either. So,
true. Yeah.
Right?
And just to tie it in, because I liked how you tied it to your Mercury. So Kathy did mention my 52 is in my Mars. So of course that was something for me that was a youthful lesson, which is kind of what I was describing of like how I did it before in my youth, how it became a conditioning and how I've had to kind of like learn to do that differently. And it's even funny because one of the things too, and I want to point this out because I think sometimes too, we think we're either every gate, every center, it's an archetypal energy, right? And there's a spectrum. We're either, in the unbalanced, we're in the, the balanced, we're all these things. But I think sometimes like hearing me say that, right? It's like, oh, I was always under pressure. And so I was always kind of chaotic. But what was interesting, and I like to point this out, because in reflection, I would go, but I am really good under pressure. Like the stillness that I have when real crisis happens is I have this really solid, grounded. And so what's interesting is two truths can exist at the same time. I was very out of balance in one way with my 52, but yet when true crisis and pressure kicked in, I've always had a very natural stillness. And so I say that because we can exist and we can oscillate depending on what happens in our lives and where we're learning, but two truths can be the same, happen at the same time for a gate. And so I just think that's a little bit freeing also is saying, okay, well, just because we're really good at like finding the part of the gate that we were having to decondition, it's okay to recognize too that there was a piece of that gate that I've always had that is just there and it's part of who I am. And it expresses itself exactly how it's meant to in certain scenarios. So I think that's also like the beauty of human design.
Right. That's really a really great point too, because, it's through the struggles often, and actually that's another one of our electromagnetic connections is the channel of struggle. So it's interesting that we're discussing this just naturally, right? That, knowing what is the benefit of the struggle, right? What's worth and what you're getting from the struggle and what, and being able to be thankful for the struggles, right? And oftentimes we can get caught in the victim stories of our struggles and not see the beautiful strength and wisdom that came through those struggles. And so that's something, I had an experience on a plane recently where I was talking to the woman next to me. Imagine that, like people actually talked on a plane for a minute. But if anybody knows me, I talk everywhere. So, but it was a wonderful conversation. And this woman was telling me all this stuff about her mother who had just passed away earlier that spring. She was 6 weeks shy of turning 108.
Wow.
And so when I was like, so what was her secret, and then, and it was amazing too, because I did not even imagine this woman next to me was 81 either. But she said that every night she just said, I give it all to you, God, and like just let go of whatever didn't work. And every morning she said, okay, what are we going to do fun today? And she did that up until, her dying day. And, maybe a couple days before. But the thing that was really interesting, there was a different point I was going to, and there were different things that I would say just matter of factly in my conversation to her, like, oh yeah, well, my parents are both gone. And, I'd say different things. And she said, wow, you've had a lot of pain. And I was like, I had never, because all the things I was saying, I was just saying as part of my life. Right. And I was like, yeah, but we've all had a lot of pain, right? And I'm not minimizing the pain. I've lost I'm the youngest of 9, and I've already lost 3 siblings, and, but I'm also, blessed to have had all these wonderful experiences, even the experiences of being able to be there or not be there, or no, just like you get something from everything, that you experience if you allow it to be what it is. And I think understanding that those struggles all have gifts. And now I think I rambled.
No, I think it's a great ramble, because I have a very similar story and belief about this, because I have the gate 28 and Kathy has the gate 38. And so together, as she mentions, it's the gate of struggle. But I have a very similar perspective of struggles in my life. If I were to tell someone my story, they would be like, oh my gosh, I also have the gate 51, which is like shock and initiation. And it's like, yeah. And so like when you like tell an external person your story, they're like, oh my gosh, you must be so strong. Like they say all these things like it's a big deal. And you're like, I really didn't think it was that big of a deal. And I think sometimes where this shows up too, it's like, especially as people who are like maybe entrepreneurs and things like that, and you're trying to like find like what you're able to teach people, or, you hear all these things, right? People are like, well, I really don't have anything to teach. I really don't have anything to say. And then people ask you about your life story. They're like, what are you talking about? But we almost see the struggle as such, just like another stepping stone. Not that we're bypassing, but almost that gate 28 and 38 gives us the ability to kind of just keep going. Like we're just weeding through the stuff. We're like, okay, this one was hard. We got to learn from this one. Okay, this one, it's almost like this sorting energy to me. And it's like, it was just another step in my journey. And when I look back at it from outside perspective, I'm like, oh, you're right. Like that probably was hot. I lost a sibling when I was young, and so it's like same things. Like I had a child very young, all of these big things that people are like, whoa, and you're like, oh, well, okay, and I think to me it's almost like this piece, to your point of like the victim piece. It's like it has always helped me not stay in victim, because to be honest, when you go through a lot of things like that, if you get stuck in victim, you get stuck and you don't move. And so there's also this instinct of like, I've got to move through it, not bypass it, because that's very different. I just want to be clear about that. We're not bypassing, we're not avoiding the pain, but we're going, okay, we're still okay. And there's just a piece of that. And I think too, one of the gifts, and I don't know how you feel about it with the 38, but I think one of the gifts that also does for me is I can very easily hear victim from other people in their stories. And one of the things that I'm really good at is I'm like, okay, well, let's flip this, right? Because if that story is still persisting in your life, you're getting something from it, right? So can we tease out what you're getting for it and then change the story of it? And I don't know if you experience the same as the 38, but I think it gives us a little bit of a perspective difference.
I think that I understand what you're saying. And I do think that there is an element of that in the 28, 38. So I'm not saying that I think that's wrong, but I think that lives deeper in, another electromagnetic we have is the 1333.
Yes.
And so, and you and I were talking about this because we both have a lot of training in quantum human design, and the language she uses to describe those 2 gates felt very similar to both of us when we were talking about it. So I was looking a little deeper in it, and I was listening to a video, I think it was with Ashley Nicole. I don't know if you know who she is. She does Unlock Your Design with Bella. I forget Bella's last name, but and they have a wonderful website called 64 Doors, and they do a lot of stuff about archetypes. But she had this wonderful video, and she was really talking about how that channel, and I'll try to remember to link it in case anyone wants to see.
I'm writing it down.
1333 is it's called the Channel of the Prodigal, and it's all about listening and, listening to people's secrets and stories. And gate 13 in quantum human design is called the Gate of the Narrative. and now I'm blanking on what she referred to. I think, the gate of the listener. That's what it is in traditional. And then in gate 33, the thing she called the gate 33 was the gate of the medicine woman.
Oh.
And so what she was really saying in this channel is if you have the whole channel, so I'm also looking at, she did talk a little bit about the parts. And so if you have the whole channel, you listen to people's stories and then know what they need, right? And so when I have a niece who has the whole channel, and my sister has the 33, so that's an electromagnetic for us, and you and I do, and then my husband also has a 33. So I have a lot of
you have a lot of 33s.
I have a lot of 33s, and so this idea that I can listen, and I often know, and this makes so much sense that I've always known, why do I always listen to people and then find the person or the thing that they need instead of it always just coming from me, and if they call it out from me, and if they recognize that I have something they need, I can be their medicine woman, but that almost has to be called out from me. But oftentimes I will say, constantly saying, well, you should talk to my sister because she does energy work and she can help you with this, and da da da. And so, or let me ask my husband what he thinks about da da da. Like I'm always, like that's pretty much that energy. And so it's easy to let that energy feel like inadequacy or self-doubt too, because it's like I'm listening, but I can let my natural tendency to be like, oh, I know who you need. I can let that tendency override and not be like, oh, maybe I'm who you need. But I have to feel recognized and invited for that to happen. And my 1-8 is what defines my identity center. The 13 is on the identity center, the G center. And I have that defined through the 1-8, and it's a split for me. So if someone doesn't recognize my authentic voice, my creative expression, and that doesn't feel correct, then I'm not the one for you, right? But I might still know who the one for you is, or something like that. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think because I was also looking into it, because like you said, we both were like, these feel so very similar for us. And I think that's the beauty of the nuance of each little tweak. And so for me, I was really honing in on the 13 being part of the G center and the 33 being part of the throat, which for me in my human design is not defined because I am not a manifesting generator. And so I was really kind of playing with this concept.
You have a defined throat and be a
manifester. Yeah. I was just going with the fact that I'm already a generator.
But you could still be a generator and have a defined throat. It just when you can have a motorized throat.
Yes. So, yes. So thank you for clarifying.
But I think if you had I'm sorry to just if you had the 13, it would make you a manifesting generator because you have a connection from your identity center to your sacral. So that would make you have a motorized throat. But someone could have the 1333 and be a generator if they don't have their identity center connect to their sacral. So continue.
No,
sorry.
Thank you. Because that's exactly where I was going for my own side.
Yeah.
It could happen other ways. But I was kind of honing in on, okay, well, they both have this energy of listening and people wanting to tell you all their stories. And I was joking because I was telling Kathy, I was like, I can be anywhere and people will just spill their guts to me. I can be standing in the line and the grocery store clerk tells me like the story about their ex-husband. And I'm like, I've been here for 2 minutes. But what I was really kind of like teasing out a little bit was because also both energies are like recognizing what other people need, being able to take that story, personal narratives, their narratives, twist it and kind of like turn it around into a more positive and help them. And I was like, so what's at the root of this? And I was really kind of thinking, okay, well, the 13's on the G center. So it's really about finding something to bring you or that person or that situation back to the correct love and direction. So it's like, it could be an action you do to help them. It could be somebody you find to help them. It's like, but all of it's coming from this place of love and support, and let me help direct you to what you need. Mm-hmm. Versus the 33 coming from the throat is more about, I'm going to use it to speak it, to write it, to communicate it to people directly from the throat. So that was kind of one of the nuances that popped out at me, is like maybe how we go about it. Mm-hmm. And for me too, because the throat is open, it's also recognizing that when I do have the answers, because I can see very clearly, it's still a projected channel or a projected gate. So it's like making sure that I don't, just verbally word vomit on people. Well, blah, 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 blah. So I was also kind of playing with what center those gates were on, and maybe how those gifts would then just manifest a little differently for us, even though it's very similar in what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. So, a lot of that resonates. The whole,
I know you're going to play with that. I can see the wheels spinning.
And then it's funny because I feel like a lot of times I don't respond. Well, okay, because I'm not, I don't respond right away to things because I have to, get it all.
You're going to message me later,
right? I'll be like, right. Or maybe we'll be talking afterwards and I'll be like,
yeah.
Oh. So, but I want to back up a little bit and talk more in general about, because you said you entered into your self-discovery phase around the time that you had your youngest child.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how understanding yourself more fully, authentically, for who you're here to be, has changed the way you parent or just in relationships with other people in general.
So huge. In fact, it's one of my biggest passions right now. You'll hear me say a lot that when we understand more who we are and heal ourselves, it's actually generational healing. We're healing our parents, we're healing our children. And I love this concept of like the children are our future ancestors. And so the goal of all healing, right, is not only for me, is not only about understanding myself, but how can I also understand myself so clearly and understand the other person that I'm not creating wounds in the other person that they have to untangle later, right? And this isn't about like controlling it, but it's about awareness and how we interact with each other, right? We're still only responsible for ourselves. We each have our own path, but sometimes just that understanding of like, oh, we are going to interact this way, and I'm going to do my best to do it in a way that doesn't condition the other person when we're talking specifically about our children. I'm very passionate about that. So I laugh about the concept because you know how there's these adages that we kind of say in humanity that's like, they're kind of these flippants. Well, no two children are the same. It's like, they're not. They're literally not. And so when we say like, well, we parent our children differently, of course you do. So it's interesting because I have two children, two boys. My oldest is 28. So he's a grown man at this point. I was very young when I had my oldest. My second, we waited because we were only going to have one child. So we didn't have our second child until 16 years later. So of course, I'm a completely different person. And, from just living experience. And my youngest comes in and I have parented them completely differently. One of the things that I've come to understand though, is my oldest and I are both 5'1s. We are also both non-emotional generators. We triggered the hell out of each other his entire childhood, but I didn't have this tool to understand what was going on. So in retrospect, I can go, oh, like we were just projecting all over each other. And right, even as a 5'1", we can do it to other people too.
Yeah.
So when my youngest came in, I was just starting. I still didn't have human design yet, but I found human design early enough in his childhood that it's really shifted. So my youngest, as I mentioned, he came in with the cross of the vessel of love. So it's one of the two crosses that has all of their incarnation cross gates in the heart. So he is very much about
in the G center.
Yes, in the G center. I also kind of reference it like that, but it's like this love and direction, right? And so he is somebody who is very loving. He is very he's just the sweetest child, right? And he's very emotionally defined. And he has the gate 12 or the channel 1222. So he's very emotional. He like came into my family and was like, hello, we're going to talk about emotions, because the rest of us are non-emotionals. And the biggest thing that I've had to learn, and he has been the biggest teacher for me, is how not to crush those emotions. Because coming from someone who's not traditionally like driven by their emotions, we don't have an internal emotional wave. It's not that we don't have emotions, but we're non-emotional in the sense that we don't have an internal wave of emotions. Just letting him have his lows, and not questioning. Because the other thing I used to witness about myself, right, is like open emotional center. I'm trying to make sure everybody's okay. And especially when it's your child. So when he would have his lows, it's even, in my opinion, it's even conditioning to go, are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? Are you still okay? He's a manifester. So he's also.
And you're asking him all these yes, no questions.
Yes.
And questions in general. Yes. Oh my God.
So in looking back, like the first couple of years, I was like, whoa. And so now like it shifted, right? Now I ask him how he feels about things. When he's low, I don't make it a big deal. I'm just like, okay, let me know if you need me. He's somebody who has to like process his feelings, right? And so he's 12 now, and we still have a process where he'll text me if I'm not home, or if I'm whatever, he'll come get me in the bedroom if I am home, and he'll go, can we talk? And like at night, we'll just stop, and he just kind of unloads his feelings to me so he can go to bed, right? He's emptying out, because he's in a house full of sacral people.
Yeah.
And just understanding that when he goes to his room and needs space, we don't go try and chase him down and being like, are you okay? When he withdraws and his big energy, like when he comes out at 200%, you're like, whoa, you haven't done anything in 2 months. And all of a sudden now you're like crazy, and not making this story about why all of a sudden what's wrong with you? Why are you all crazy right now when you've been really baseline melancholy for the last 2 months? So just understanding that about him and my tendencies, one as a mother, but then also because of some of the openness in my chart to try and like inquire and understand and fix early on, I was like, whoa, we can't do that. And so a lot of it has been about preserving his autonomy, right? Preserving his emotions, preserving his inner, like preserving what's true for him without trying to condition him, right? That is my whole goal in life, is like, how can I still be me and respect the other person and not condition the child so that they have to decondition later in life? And that doesn't mean I'm perfect, but right. I'm very
and conditioning to a certain degree is inevitable. Otherwise, you're not experiencing life, you know. Yep. So we get, but when we are aware of the fact that, you know, we're being conditioned or we're conditioning others and doing it in a way that, like you said, respects them. But now you're saying all this stuff, and you and I have not talked about your son at all in previous conversations. But it's really interesting as the parent of a manifester, you know, I'm very aware of some of those things, but I'm looking at your chart, and your sacral only has one gate, and it's your design earth gate 22, which I just want to preface this by saying, I often find when working with clients that the design earth is the holdout energy, that when you can understand that and really embrace it, like, you move forward so much. So this is compromised in relationship with your son. So compromise, for those of you who don't know, means she has the hanging gate, someone else has the full channel. So she has this way that she's meant to experience this energy in relationships, right? So when you're 22 is in a relationship where the 12 is available, it's happy because it feels that it's happy, or happy might not be the right word. It's satisfied, right?
I like that.
Yeah. Because it's not all, it's an emotional channel that it's going to feel. So it's getting what the 22 wants. But in this relationship,
he has his own.
He has the whole energy. So you don't really feel like you get to do your half. And as a mother, when you don't feel like you can do your part, which my daughter has the channel of struggle, 28-38, I have the 38. So, and she's also got the 39, and I have the 39-55. So I know all about how compromise affects personal relationships. So I'm wondering how that has felt for you when this is such a big part of what the energy you're meant to be grounded in, how you've navigated that.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things, so it's funny because for me, 22 obviously is an emotional kind of like gate, even though I'm not an emotionally defined person, right? And so
explain what that gate is, because I didn't even say to anybody what.
Yeah, so how I experience this gate, this is the gate of like surrender. This is the gate of like grace. This is about kind of like learning to kind of like give yourself grace, to surrender to the flow, to be open and not, I'm going to use the word controlling because that's a big thing for me. And that's how I experience it. And so for me, like learning how to surrender to the fact that he doesn't necessarily need me all the time. And as somebody who's like, I'm a generator, I need to be needed. I have an open will center. I need to prove that I'm needed.
Right. And I'm your mother.
I'm your mother. What do you mean you don't need me? So I would say the biggest part for me, and because he's a manifester, he is very solid in who he is. And because we've been very conscious of that, right? So it's been about me learning that not being, quote, needed in the ways that I have been conditioned that needing means that you're important and that makes you valid as a mother. I've had to let go of that story and really flip that story on its lid and go, no, I have a child who's very grounded in who he is. This kid does not like, peer pressure is not a thing for him. Kids try to peer pressure him and he's like, no, thanks. I'm over here. Right. Like he doesn't, and he's also single definition. He doesn't need other people. Right. And so it's about going, okay, what does he need? He needs to process his emotions. He's a very emotional person. He needs a safe space to do that. When he's ready to talk, he wants to talk. That's how I can support him best as a mother. And so I've had to take apart this story of what makes you needed. And I've had to just surrender to the fact that I'm here to support you as a human being, however you need me. And it doesn't mean anything about me if you don't need me in that way. This is our relationship dynamic. This is our mother-child relationship dynamic. And also just understanding that conditioning comes up for me because that's how I feel love. And so it's always turned back on me. Okay, well, if I'm really feeling like he doesn't need me and I'm feeling some way about it, what's going on with me? And so it's really about self-awareness for me. And then the gate of just surrendering to, with him particularly, about not being needed that way. And like all the stories that society tells us about that I had come to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is amazing how, as parents, we oftentimes try to understand our children, which is a really wonderful thing. But until we understand ourselves, right, we really can't do it justice, because if we lose ourselves in parenting, we're perpetuating a pattern that we're here to break. And I just realized I just looked at the clock for the first time and we're like almost done. I was like, holy cow, what? How did that?
So good.
Right? It's been, and so I always say when we start to think, well, what are we going to talk about? I'm like, it doesn't matter. We'll just talk and it'll be what it's meant to be. But we do have a few comments here, and none seem to really be questions. So if anybody has any questions, put them in now so I can get to them. But I just did want to say that Nancy said, me too. That was to someone saying, Murky Moo says, loving this chat really resonates. And that was early on. And then Nancy said, me too. And then she said, I love that I can speak to you, Kathy, and you are natural to listening and you are who I need. Nancy, love you. And then Gloria says, very engaging. Thanks, Gloria. And I'm hoping Gloria is going to say that means she's ready to be a guest, because she would be fabulous. And then Nancy said, I've interested in constellation work lately, and I appreciate your saying our children become our ancestors. And that is another thing that's a great point. And I want to give you a chance to respond, but I also want to throw in there that I noticed that I was thinking about your Pluto gates being in 57, the gate of intuition, and 48, which is the gate of depth, and that being where your transformation comes. But that Pluto is a generational gate. So it's like your generation specifically is really having this huge, huge impact right now, right?
Yes. And it's funny because I've judged that depth so much. Like I'm also in astrology, I'm also a Scorpio moon. I've got 57 multiple times in my chart. Like I don't want to do surface level people. Like, and sometimes there's been conditioning around that too. But I think that is really for me as a generation where, because I look at my parents, right? And if you even just think as a society, it's this stuff, we didn't talk about like self-development. We didn't talk about those things before. And it's like, I feel like we're in this generation now where we do have the ability to do healing on ourselves. We do have the ability to understand now that it's okay that we talk about these things, that we heal our children. And I'm like, it's a big, I don't even know how to describe it. Like I kind of get a little emotional about it because it's like, I see how I parented my oldest, and I'm a firm believer that like, there's no regrets. It was what it was meant to be. But it makes me really see in stark contrast, no pun, because that's my last name, but in stark contrast, the difference of the impact you can have on the next generation when you really understand who you are and what's going on. And when you really understand how you interact with those other people. And so it's like, yeah, it's a biggie for me. And it's like, I always start with the person, but a lot of my clients will start with the person, and then we'll get into the children, or we'll get into their, even if they don't have children yet, we start looking at their parents. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look at this generational pattern. And it's like, how can we not repeat it? And it's a natural progression for me, I think, just because of how my chart's set up.
Yeah. Yeah. But the generational healing is a huge theme right now. And it's in our we're healing stuff in our DNA, and we could do a whole talk sometime about that or something, but
I would love to. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, it is 2 minutes to the top of the hour. Nancy added a comment that she's a Scorpio moon also, and no wonder she was drawn to this hour with us too.
Yes.
Yes. And Nancy is somebody who has been on Sunday Story Hour and is a good friend of mine. So, okay. So I really want to thank you. This has just flowed so amazingly. Like, I feel like it was 10 minutes, right? Weren't we just talking about that? How everything seems like it's
how time is an illusion. I said this thing to somebody one time. I was like, if you really want to get into like time is an illusion, I really want you to think about, we're all used to like this concept of people on the other side of the world, right? Or at a different hour. And I'm like, okay, but it's really this construct that we've created, right? Because if you think about, okay, well, what happens at the end of the month? I'm in a different month than you are. Or at the end of the year on New Year's Eve, we're in 2 completely different years.
right.
And what happens at the end of a century? And I'm like, time is such an illusion,
Right.
that we can use to our advantage too. Anyway, side note.
Yes, that's why manifesting generators in quantum human design are called time benders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I want to thank you for this, it's been really great. And if people want to connect with you, I'm sure you can put some stuff in there, but just tell people what the best way to connect with you.
Absolutely.
And I didn't even ask you what you're doing now. We've been so busy just talking.
That's okay. It's okay.
Say what you're doing and how people connect with you if they feel drawn to.
Yeah, for sure. So I obviously do sessions for people. I also do coaching. A lot of my clients go into like, short-term or medium-term coaching, because you can get really deep, but you can heal a lot of stuff. You just need a little bit of time. I also do some group classes, depending. I have one coming up for sacral people. It's called Satisfied, the Art of Being a Generator. So yes, so that's coming up soon. But you can find me on all my social channels, are pretty much lisastark.co. I think it's lisa.stark.co, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all those things. And in my email, my website is also lisastark.co. So pretty much across all channels, you can find me that way, and I can drop it into the thing so people have it.
Okay, that would be great. All right. Well, thank you very much. Every week we share stories here of how someone has learned to understand themselves in a more loving and empowering way through the lens of human design. How you think and speak about yourself matters. Human design can show you the reframe, show you where you may have outgrown your story. It really is transformative stuff, folks. So it gets a little overwhelming sometimes when you hear us start throwing around gates, but really just starting with strategy and authority, right? I mean, it makes a huge difference. So DM me or feel free to set up a discovery call. And my website is just my name, kathybashanko.com. And you can run your chart there as well. Have a great day, and we'll see you guys next week, if not sooner. And this will be, have all the stuff in the comments. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, we'll put it in the description. Have a great day.
Guys.